All right, so again, let's go back to those questions. Again, these are the same four from earlier, but I have another question. What are the implications if we don't answer these? This is what I think about at night. What happens if we do nothing? Well, here's some of what I've seen in the field. You can keep going, please. Here's what's at stake. Guess what? We're diverse, but we're not inclusive. Let me let that sit out there. We're diverse, but we're not inclusive. I'll give you diversity because I get that a lot. We have diversity. Have you seen the latest trends with all the DEIA plus, right, initiatives? The funding is going. It was at a peak a few years ago. It's not now. And so I get this a lot. And I'll say, okay, I will give you diversity. You know why I'm going to give you diversity? Because we have Virgos sitting next to the Sagittariuses. And we have the pescatarians sitting next to the vegetarians, right? We have gluten-free folks that are right in here. You see where I'm going with that? Like they'll want to argue that with me. We are diverse. And I'll say, but you're not racially diverse. And you're definitely not inclusive. And myself and a small number of colleagues have really tackled the field to take a look at itself. And then if we do nothing, this like devaluing of certain languages will happen, right? We don't mean to, it's not the intent, but we let it happen. So now you've got that bystander effect. I used to do this exercise with my undergrad students. You all are undergrads, right? Okay, so I used to do this exercise where I would ask students like, oh, if you could go somewhere and learn a language, like what language would you pick? And I would have the languages. And I remember a student picking French. So you'd pick the language, and then the next card I would pass out would be where you have to go to learn that language. And that student got Haiti. Oh, you thought I was going to say France or some other place, right? Yeah, it changes the narrative when you think of a language and language hierarchy and what's associated with that language or who is associated with that language. Do you still want to learn it? So we would continue devaluing certain language groups and cultures. Essentially, we're looking at an unintentional erasure of a whole student group. And I don't mean to be drastic there, but like those were some of the things that I have found and shared when I said, like, it's just not there. Look at your textbooks. How many of your case studies actually have a Black English learner? When they say, let's learn about Juan. What does Juan look like? Or when you have an assignment that says, go to this website and listen to these student portraits. Who's on the website? Who's not on the website? Or when they say, go and interview a teacher who teach English learners and ask them these 20 questions, who's being interviewed and who's not? It's this false sense of ownership as well. When we do find out information about certain student groups, who owns the narrative? And there's so much I can tell you, but let me just ask you this. How are we helping students to own their own stories? This is super important because when I sat on that panel and listened to those women talk about their experiences as Black immigrants and DACA recipients, they're not published anywhere. They don't have to be, but we definitely want to welcome those stories and share them out more widely. I think my question is, if you don't have a green card, do you still have a voice? Failed pedagogical practices is number one. I want to show you an example of these failed practices. I spent a decade of my career really working with teacher educators and doing lots of strategies. Anybody do strategies work? Yeah, what are the strategies? We have to get in there and differentiate. Anybody hear differentiation a lot at work? Okay. Yep. How about scaffolds? You hear scaffolds a lot? Yeah, yeah, it's like a bingo card, right? We're just doing all the things, but what does that really mean? And my work is really centered around, do you have data to prove that what you're doing for students is working? Don't just tell me that you have a two-way, transitional, early exit, sheltered, pull out, co-teaching, bilingual, do language model. Did anybody get that? Because that's what it sounds like. If we're doing all that for students, do we have data to prove that it's actually working? And then this college and career trajectory or work readiness, there are additional barriers that we're putting up. And I'm concerned about that because far too many of our students are missing out on opportunities. And if you go on certain social media websites, like it seems like everybody's having a fabulous experience. People put a lot of happiness up. Yeah, you only put happy things. Look what I'm doing here. Look what I'm doing here. But what I'm seeing out in schools is quite the opposite. And I'm concerned about that. When we look at the long-term implications of this, we won't be off the hook, so to speak. I also added this question mark because, again, I don't have all the answers, but I'd like to hear just from the crowd a little bit. Thus far, what else do you think is at stake if we don't attempt to answer those questions? Just share out. You don't have to raise your hand or anything. What else might be missing from this list of what's at stake? Yes, please.
Perpetuating the status quo.
Yeah. What else?
Families.
Oh, what about the families? What about them?
Breaking down.
Yeah. What's at stake here? So are we helping to build capacity or are we tearing down? So I want you to think about that. What's at stake? And of course, that question mark could just go on forever. Keep going, please.